Hi, I wanted to go through some top tips when it comes to writing personal statements, particularly when it comes to applying for positions related for law. So this is obviously going to be useful, I hope, when it comes to writing your personal statements to apply for law or related degrees, drafting applications on Unifrog, or even just applying for positions later on. I have given advice about applying for law already, and I'm always happy to do so if you want to get in touch with me. But I just wanted to go through, I think, what is one of my top tips for applying. And I think one of the hardest things that we have to do when it comes to writing our personal statements is talking about our own skills, achievements, and experience. It can be a difficult process if you're not really used to selling your skills, so it were. And this is something that I've always done when it has come to applying for positions, whether it was my law degree, my teaching degrees, my jobs, even my job at Newcastle Sixth Form College. I sat down and did this, so I really recommend it no matter what you're applying for. When it comes to writing personal statements for law, I think there are two things that you've really got to bear in mind. Universities will often have a lot of applicants, and they will probably have similar grades to you. So grades aren't the best indicator of who they should be giving offers to. It's the same if it comes to applying for jobs in the legal profession. A lot of people will be similarly qualified, so what they're looking to do is set you apart. Another thing to remember, of course, is that this is the first time they get to meet you, so you've got to convince them that you're the right person for them, and you may not get that interview stage. So this is your first way to get their attention, and you need to show them that you are the right choice to make for the next round. So when it comes to writing your personal statement, you need to convince the university of two things. So number one, you are going to stay on their course. You're not going to drop out, you're going to complete, and you're going to pay them all their fees. The second thing that you want to convince them is that while you are there, because you're not going to leave, you've shown that already, while you are there, you are going to add value to their university. So what that means is you're going to stick with it, and you're going to do well, and you're also going to contribute to the wider university life. I think the same principle applies to jobs as well. You want to show that you're not just going to be able to do the job, that should be a given, but also that you're going to add value to their organisation and you can bring something special. How do we know what to say? How can we convince universities or employers or apprenticeship positions or scholarship panels? How do we show them that we are the right choice to bank on? Well, I think the good news is that most of the time, the employer or the person offering the scholarship or the apprenticeship opportunity, they already tell you what they want, and that's usually in something called the person specification, or it can be part of the job specification. So usually somewhere there will be a list of skills or qualities or experiences that they are looking for. It's a little bit harder when it comes to applying for a university course because universities don't necessarily always list what makes an ideal student. So instead, what I've tried to do is think of the different skills that you would need to display to a university to show that you are going to finish your university course and you are going to be a success on that university course. So when it comes to applying for anything like this, where you've got to write a statement or a reference, I first have a look and I make a list, just a bullet point list of the skills that they're looking for. As I said, this can be in the person specification, or it could be in the list of the criteria for a scholarship or apprenticeships, bursaries, things like that. Or it could be something like this. So when it comes to a university degree, when I've sort of been looking at what our successful students have done in the past, these are the sorts of skills that they are generally looking for, I think. So obviously you need to show that you have a passion for your subject. You have to show that you're passionate about law to prove that you're going to be able to stay, that you've really thought this through and you've made the right choice. You're not going to change your mind further down the line. that you actually understand what the subject involves, that you've done some further reading and you actually understand what you'll be studying. You also would be, it would also be a good idea to have a look at an understanding of the careers that are involved. So have you actually shown that you know what this degree can lead to? Or have you shown an understanding of what you'll be doing if you're applying for an apprenticeship, for example? Commercial awareness is becoming more and more important if applying for a position in a law firm, especially if you're looking to practice in an area of commercial law. So it's not just enough to show that you know what's going on in the legal world, but it's also really useful to show that you understand what's going on in the business and politics world. So now is a really, really good time to start looking on news apps and just keep an understanding of sort of the general things that are happening in the markets. That's less important if you're looking at going to something like criminal law or policing, but even then I think it's a good idea to have an idea of what's going on in the world. Now, the Inner Temple blog, if you search for that, the Inner Temple library pulls together all headlines and news stories relating to law and puts them in one easy to find place. And you'll be able to get lots of current commercial awareness. It's updated daily off that. One of the other skills that's really useful for a lawyer, of course, is to show persuasiveness. So being able to sway people to your side of the argument. I think these are useful not just for law, but universally in some sort of way, shape or form. So showing that you are confident or that you are building in confidence. Presentation or public speaking skills. So most jobs will require some element of that, and of course law features very heavily. Essay or academic writing, so evidence that shows that you're comfortable writing in a formal manner. Time management skills, so juggling your responsibilities and meeting deadlines is of course really important as a student or employee or apprentice. Your communication skills, so not just the fact that you can maybe talk in front of groups of people, but also any one-on-one interactions, so showing that you're confident with being able to do that. Research, so that would be particularly important when it comes to a law degree, but also a lot of careers. And also these two at the bottom are super important. So you need to demonstrate your ability to work as a member or as a leader of a team, but also that you can work independently and you're self-motivated. So I think when it comes to applying for a university degree or an apprenticeship or a scholarship, you do want to try and show that you are able to do these things. So how do we do that? It can be really hard just to sit and think, well, what have I done? So what I recommend is writing out these bullet points and then give yourself plenty of time over a few days to start thinking about when you've had the opportunity to display or work on these skills. And it's as simple as creating a list that branches off, so essentially end up with a mind map that shows just how great you are. So, for example, if you want to show your subject passion, start thinking about the things that you've done that show that you really love the subject. So, for example, maybe you want to talk about some books that you've read. What books have you read and what did you learn from that? For example, if you do A-level law, what have you learned in A-level law and what was your particular favourite part? Try not to go for something generic. So, try to avoid things like my favourite cases R versus Brown or Donahue versus Stevenson, because everybody's heard of those cases. And also, be authentic. Don't just pick a case because you think it sounds interesting, because of course if you're in an interview situation they may ask about it. So think about a case that has genuinely struck a chord with you. So for example, it could be researching Sally Challen and the laws around coercive control and her treatment at the hands of the law. Try and find something that interests you, and again the Inner Temple blog is another good place to do some subject reading. It could be things such as going to court and watching trials, and that can be difficult in a lockdown situation, but see if you can get any sort of experience in that way. Avoid fiction if at all possible, because it doesn't really reflect truly what happens in the law. Then you want to show that you actually have an understanding of what the subject involves. So, for example, what are the degree options that are being offered by different universities? If there are some common ones, so for example, if a lot of them offer something like family law, what have you shown in maybe your other subjects like sociology that you have an understanding about family? Again, when it comes to the sort of wider understanding of what the degree will involve, does it have an enterprise year? Does it have a year abroad? What are you expected to do as part of that? And again, you can start thinking of all the different things that you've done over the last couple of years that contribute to these. What about understanding of what a career as a lawyer involves? So for example, if you've done any kind of mock trial prep as part of enrichments, court visits, again, if you've gone along, and if you've been to a real life trial for whatever reason, that's another really good opportunity to talk about it. One of the best personal statements I ever read was by someone whose family was applying for immigration status, and that was fascinating because they'd had a real first-hand experience of what law involves. It can also be other things as well, like a work experience you would maybe perhaps write about here. So even if you've been able to shadow a family member, and again, it doesn't always necessarily have to be in a law firm. There are lots of other firms that you can work in that will have some elements of law. So for example, if you've done work experience in an office, did they have to follow any health and safety or data protection regulations? As I said, for commercial awareness, start looking at the news. Is there anything out there that links that's important to you? So this is all about business, and if you've done business studies or economics, again, that's something you can talk about really well. And you can just start again taking paths off this. So when have you had to show persuasiveness? When have you had to do that? So perhaps it could be debating. So you might have done a debate as part of enrichment or law or one of your other subjects. So perhaps you've had a debate in English literature, for example. This is where any jobs in retail come in handy. So perhaps your particular job involved you having to make sales and be persuasive. Or this is perhaps where you can talk about any essays that you've written as part of coursework where you've had to argue a particular point of view. Any of these little opportunities, what we're starting to do is build a picture of the different things that you've been able to do. So confidence, for example. Perhaps you've been involved in kind of sports or hobbies, even as growing up. Do any of those, have they involved you working with people? And again, your part-time jobs will often have some element of this. Have you done any volunteering? Maybe as part of college enrichment or in your spare time? Presentation skills. Think about your other classes. So even if it's a subject that doesn't seem particularly related to law, can you relate your presentation skills back? So for example, in geography, you might have had to present your findings to the rest of the class. That is you public speaking. Or if you've been an assistant, if you've ever helped out at parents' evenings or things like that in school or college, that would be really, really useful. Times when you've had to stand up and speak out or speak to a group. Essay writing, of course, that's where your other subjects can come in, but also things like your EPQ, coursework subjects. What have you done your EPQ or coursework on? So I once had a person who was applying for law whose EPQ was on stellar evolution, completely unrelated, but what he was able to do was talk about his essay and research skills as part of doing that and how that made him a good law student. Time management, of course, again, comes back to any hobbies, sports or clubs that you're part of. And again, your jobs here are a valuable resource. So you may think that your part-time job in a shop has nothing to do with being a lawyer. You're wrong, because you can show how you manage to juggle your studies and your work at the same time. And that's in reality what most university students will do anyway. So communication skills, again, most jobs involve talking to people. Can you think of any times in the past few years when you've had to deal with people? Maybe you've had to work in groups on your coursework. So for example, if you study drama as well as law, maybe you've had to work with other people on your film or media projects. Perhaps you've had to work on your communication skills as part of job or volunteering opportunities. And if you don't have those already, the summer holidays is a great opportunity between years 12 and 13 to try and get some experience out there. Research skills, again, if you've done EPQ, that comes in really, really handy. Teamwork. Sports is a great example that gets often overlooked. So have you taken part in any sports or any clubs? What position did you hold and what responsibility did you have as part of that? When have you had to display leadership qualities? Is there anything that you've taken leadership of, whether it's in college or out of college? Of course, jobs, again, super important for displaying teamwork. Or don't forget any projects that you've worked on in college as part of a team as well. And finally, of course, independence. When have you shown that you've gone out of your way to do kind of extra reading? Have you worked on any big projects? What have you done as part of your coursework in school or college, for example? Is there anything that you do in terms of perhaps being a carer or a volunteer? And then this is simply how I start to write my personal statement. What I start to do is think about what different things I did as part of growing up. So, for example, I used to work in Waterstones, so I used to have to communicate with customers, but I was also very independent. So I got to order the books in for the cookery section. Excellent job. So, I would maybe start discussing ordering there. So you can kind of come off in different ways and think about the different things that you've had to do. So, for example, if I start thinking about a mock trial, what role was I? Was I perhaps a witness? And I had to think on the spot, which shows independence. Or maybe I was a barrister and I had to persuade the jury. What are the different things that I learned from work experience, for example? So I actually worked in a marketing department. So you could just talk about organisation, nothing to do with law, but really, really key skills. And you can just keep filtering off the different things that you've talked about. So for example, in sport, it might be that you are a gym leader. So that involves speaking in front of large crowds. When it comes to your job, for example, when it comes to kind of responsibility and confidence, do you have to handle cash or train new staff? That shows responsibility, and it also shows that you're able to manage your time and skills effectively. So, it used to be that I used to have to train new staff in my job at Waterstones. So I've had to train. And when you start really thinking about the things that you've done, you can start to pull together. So for example, back when I did business studies at my A levels, I did a research project on Marks and Spencer's. So you could talk about what that involved, and that involved independent research, gathering sources of information. When you start pulling it all together, then actually you start thinking, wow, I have a lot to offer and I have a lot to say. And the best thing is they're already grouped, because I can see straight away, well, I've talked about my job there and my job there, my job here. So when it comes to talking about a job I've had in my personal statement, I could say that I used to work as Waterstones as a bookseller. This led me to increase my confidence in dealing with customers and communicating with them clearly. And also that I had to work as part of a team, but also I had to work independently by ordering the books. So you can start seeing the different things that you've done and link those skills together. So for example, you could say that as part of your, a sport or a hobby that you commonly do, start seeing where you've written it down in different places. So being captain of the netball team increased my confidence. I had to manage my time between my studies and attending practice, and I had to work as part of a team with the rest of them to be able to win and meet our goals. So I hope that's helpful and it gives you some confidence. It's a difficult thing to start doing, but it's a skill you'll use throughout the rest of your life. So keep your personal statement, and you can start using that as a basis for when you start applying for jobs, whether it's part-time or in future as a solicitor or a barrister. Thanks for watching.